Yes, a special issue is essentially about two things. It's about on the one hand, the expansion of climate policies, so the adoption of any policies that aim at reducing greenhouse gas emissions to mitigate climate change. And on the other hand, it's about the dismantling of climate policies. So that means removing existing policies or undermining their functioning. Doing the special issue came with, I would say, one main motivation is the observation that actually we now understand really well what drives anthropogenic climate change, and we also know how it can be mitigated. But for some reason, it's just not really happening at a scale necessary. So it's pretty clear that the barriers to more ambitious climate action are actually mostly not of a scientific or technological nature. It's rather the political process, the political factors that determine how fast and how ambitious countries act against climate change. And if you look at research published on climate change, actually the share of studies that study actually those factors, those barriers is really small. So there's a big need to understand how political factors influence climate policy expansion and dismantling. Especially comparative empirical research. That's also why we opted to have the special issue in the Journal of Comparative Analysis, JCPA. Yes, and yes, as I mentioned already before, especially the dismantling of climate policy needs more attention. There's not many empirical studies available, and yes, now especially with right-wing movements and authoritarian forces gaining more and more momentum, which have a clear agenda against climate action. Not only in the US, but also we see this in India under Modi, Bolsonaro, Brazil, but also here in Germany with the AfD, the right-wing party, gaining increasing vote shares and having a clear anti-climate action agenda. When we look more specifically at the special issue, what I think what really is a strength of the special issue that articles do not only look at political administrative actors in a vacuum or like isolated, but they actually look at them yes, in relation to the institutions or the environment they act. For instance, yes, different political institutions. One article by Schaub and Drake. They show that, for instance, different electoral systems or the level of corporatism explains why countries have been more successful in removing anti-climate policies, in that case, fossil fuel subsidies. But there's also interactions with public opinion. One article shows that yes, that actually people how they support carbon taxes actually influenced by the exposure to renewable energies, and that in addition is moderated by how much they trust elected politicians. And we know that politicians respond to that because they have an incentive to be re-elected. Yes, so long answer short, it's really important to understand that these actors, political administrative actors, they don't behave all the same. They are different and have different personal features, different motivations, and in addition are influenced by the environment yes, where they act. Yes, so overall, we actually have quite a broad collection of articles, which all look at mostly at climate policy expansion. And there's several very interesting findings. one is, I already mentioned, is that actually exposure to renewable energies, mostly solar, actually seems to enhance support for climate policy expansion, at least in Germany and Switzerland. And yes, only if you're more strongly affected by the costs, if you're from a poorer environment, then you actually has a negative effect on your support. So that really comes back to the question of climate justice also. And which is also interesting is that this relationship between exposure and support for climate policy expansion is also moderated by political trust. So the more strongly you trust in politicians, the stronger the impact of exposure on support for climate policy expansion. Yeah, so that was a finding I thought was really interesting. Yes, and then another finding is that more descriptive is that actually we still have an emission gap. So that means countries, yes, they promise more in their nationally determined contributions than they actually achieve in terms of emissions. So it's really important to hold countries accountable and also people aware that this gap exists. Another finding which I found interesting was an article that shows that, or at least shows support for an ambition raising cycle between governments and companies. So it appears that countries with more ambitious climate targets, in these countries, companies also tend to have more ambitious climate targets when they opt to set themselves targets. So it might pay off actually just to have more ambitious targets, and then maybe everyone else tries to be as ambitious. Yes, I want to thank you, especially the European Research Council, for very generous funding. And part of that is the European Research Council funded our research project, which is called Deep Decarb, stands for Deep Decarbonization. And I want to thank you, all the members of the research project, and also all the authors who contributed to the article collection.